It's March 2025 and I'm paddling in the warm waters of Finikoudes Beach in the centre of Larnaca, a city built on a lot of history. Located on the southeast coast of Cyprus, the island's third largest modern city is built upon the ruins of the former Phoenician and Greek city kingdom of Kition. Regularly unearthed as the city modernises and expands, slowing construction, the ruins of the city-state have only been left visible in a small number of places, the largest and most accessible being the site of the ancient temples towards the north of the city, but also include traces of the original city walls. Established around the 13th century BCE, the state survived until 342 AD, when it was finally destroyed by a series of earthquakes. This area of the island was first occupied by Mycenaean Greeks around the 13th century BCE, exploiting the local copper deposits. The original settlements were destroyed, and there's little trace in the archaeology of these first settlers. From the 9th century BCE, the Phoenicians settled in the area of Kition and built a series of temples, which is the area visible today. The kingdom came under Egyptian domination in the 500s BCE, before Persia took control of the islands up until 332 BCE. The temple survived until 312 BCE, when the area was invaded and occupied by the successor of Alexander the Great, and later on Egyptian pharaoh Ptolemy I's Sauter. He had the temples destroyed shortly after his conquest, but despite this the city-state continued to survive, in part due to its importance as a port, reflected by the fact that a trading colony from Kition was established at Piraeus, the Athenian port city. Cyprus was annexed into the Roman Empire in 58 BCE and remained under their control, eventually falling into the Eastern Roman Empire. For Kition, a series of earthquakes would eventually spell the end of the settlement. Whilst the city survived a series of strong earthquakes around 76 AD, after which it was rebuilt, it wasn't so lucky, with another series of earthquakes in 322 and 342 that spelt the end for not just Kition, but also nearby Salamis and Paphos at the western end of the island. Over the following centuries, the island of Cyprus passed backwards and forwards between rulers, at times being part of the Byzantine Empire, then under Arab control, periods of joint control, and then from the Third Crusade, back under control by various Western European powers, including the English, Knights Templars, French, Venetians and Genoans, until the island was captured by the Ottomans in 1571. During this period, Larnaca continued to develop, at times being called Salines due to the large salt lake to the west of the city. The city's importance grew from 1373 onwards, when the main port of Cyprus, Famagusta, was captured by the Genoese, and Larnaca was chosen to be developed as a new port. During the Ottoman period, the port of Larnaca continued to be developed and grew to the most important port in the island and one of the 7 most important ports in the entire Ottoman Empire. From 1878, control of the islands passed to the United Kingdom, who ruled the island up until Cyprus's independence in 1960. Post-independence, Larnaca began to develop rapidly, a process sped up with the Turkish invasion of 1974, which saw the closure of Nicosia International Airport and the creation and development of Larnaca International Airport, which is now Cyprus's main international gateway. Once again, with Famagusta no longer under the control of the Cypriot government, the ports of Limassol and Larnaca were upgraded, moving back into their key trade roles. The long history of occupation of the island by various groups have left their mark on the city, with the Lions of St Mark and the minarets of the Ottoman-era mosques mingling together, overlooked by the originally Byzantine fortifications, much enhanced and upgraded during the 14th century, alongside the establishment of Larnaca as an important port. With the Genoese occupation of the main Cypriot port of Famagusta, the Kingdom of Cyprus elevated Larnaca to its main port and needed to provide it with adequate protection. Between 1382 and 1398, the small Byzantine-era fortification located near the harbour was upgraded and expanded into a more substantial castle to help protect the harbour. The castle continued to be used into the days of the Ottoman Empire, but by the early 18th century it had started to lose its importance and was gradually abandoned. Records in the first half of the 18th century show that the castle was in a semi-ruinous state, though still with a garrison protecting it. A new, and perhaps less pleasant use of the castle was found by the British after they took control of the island, turning the castle into a prison and installing a gallows in part of the castle for executing prisoners, with the last execution taking place in 1948. Following Cypriot independence, the castle was converted into a museum, and the courtyard was converted into an open-air theatre, though in March 2025, possibly as it was out of season, there was little evidence of this use. Repaired from its semi-ruinous state, you can climb up onto the walls of the castle and take in the views along the seafront. The main building of the castle now houses the Larnaca Medieval Museum, which has a number of antiquities from early Christendom, Byzantine and post-Byzantine Cyprus exhibited over the 3 rooms of the building, including wall paintings, pottery, utensils and weapons. A couple of 100 metres inland from the beach in the castle is the Holy Church of St. Lazarus. Recounted in the Gospel of John, Lazarus of Bethany had died and already been entombed for 4 days when Jesus resurrected him from the dead. In the Gospel, this is the last miracle carried out before Jesus' own death and resurrection. Following this, Lazarus was forced to flee to Judea because of rumoured plots on his life, and he came to Cyprus, where he was later appointed as the first bishop of Kition. He was said to have lived for another 30 years on Cyprus before his second and final death, at which point he was buried in a tomb. The location of Lazarus' tomb was lost during the period of Arab rule beginning in 649, but in 890 a tomb was found that purportedly bared the inscription, "Lazarus, 4 days dead, friend of Christ." Naturally, the Byzantine emperor of the time, Leo VI, had the remains transferred to Constantinople in 898, but in recompense had the Church of St. Lazarus erected over his tomb in the late 9th to early 10th centuries. Originally built as an Orthodox basilica church, it passed into the hands of the Catholics during Frankish and Venetian rule, at which point the Gothic portico was added on its south side. The church would originally have had an Orthodox bell tower and 3 imposing domes, but these were destroyed, likely in the first years after the conquest of Cyprus by the Ottomans, as it, along with most other churches on the island, would have been converted to a mosque. In 1589, the Ottomans sold the building back to the Orthodox Church, likely because of the presence of a Christian cemetery on the site, and for the next 200 years the building was used for both Orthodox and Catholic services. In 1857, the Ottoman authorities finally allowed Cypriot churches to have bell towers again, at which point the current tower was built in the Latinate style. After their removal to Constantinople, the relics were looted by the Fourth Crusade in the early 13th century and were brought to Marseille, but were subsequently lost. However, in 1970, a fire caused significant damage to much of the interior, including to the iconostasis, the wall of icons and religious paintings that separate the nave from the sanctuary in Orthodox churches. Renovations took from 1972 to 1974, but during that time, on November the 2nd, 1972, human remains were discovered in a marble sarcophagus that had been found under the altar, and could you believe it, they were identified as part of the saint's relics. Clearly, Emperor Leo VI hadn't done such a good job in collecting all of Lazarus's remains over a millennium earlier. Today, the tomb of St Lazarus is open to visit below the sanctuary, though it's an important place of prayer, so cameras are politely requested not to be used down there. On Lazarus Saturday, 8 days before Easter, the icon of St Lazarus that normally has pride of place in the centre of the church is taken in procession through the streets of Larnaca. Half a mile north of the Church of St Lazarus and located above parts of the ruins of Kition sits the Larnaca District Archaeological Museum. The museum is dedicated to the archaeology of the whole Larnaca district, but naturally a lot of its focus is on the ruins of Kition that it sits above. Divided into 4 rooms, the museum covers the archaeological history of the area from the earliest of finds through to the end of the city-state in the 4th century. The first room looks at the period from the Neolithic through the early to the Middle Bronze Age, including flint knives and early pottery. Along with figurines and examples of Cypriot red polished ware. The second room moves on to the Late Bronze Age, which covers the period of arrival of the Mycenaean Greeks and the original founding of Kition. The pottery becomes more elaborate in both style and decoration, as well as the appearance of the staple of many a Greek archaeological museum, the bull, as well as a set of horns of consecration, the stone calling card of the Minoans. Room 3 moves into the Iron Age and the development of Kition under the Phoenicians. From here, most of the finds are local, from finds across the city, as parts of Kition reveal themselves every time a new building's foundation are dug, or even when a road is taken up for repairs. There are also some of the larger finds, including statues and busts. The last room looks at Kition from its funeral culture and burials, and houses some of the youngest of the finds, only dating back 2,000 or so years. Starting from a stop on Finikoudes Beach, close to Larnaca Castle, the Love Bus is a 2.5-hour open-top tour of some of the key sites of the city, focusing on some of those that are trickier or even impossible to get to on foot from the city centre. After setting off, the tour starts the cruise around the old town of Larnaca, taking in the castle and church, whilst the commentary tells you about the history of Larnaca from Kition through the various islands occupiers to the creation of the Cypriot state in 1960. The bus then heads out of town, taking in the first view of a large salt lake that sits to the west of the city, and today is also home to the international airport. And onto the small suburb of Kitty, around 12 kilometres from the city, and the historic church of Panagia tis Angeloktistis, or Panagia built by angels. The earliest traces of the church go back to the 5th or 6th century, though the original basilica was destroyed around the 7th or 8th century, likely in Arab raids on the island. Though the apse and the mosaic of Panagia tis Angeloktistis, from which the church gets its name, survived and were incorporated into the current church that was later built over the foundations of the older basilica. The current church was constructed between the mid-11th and early 12th centuries in the period after Byzantine rule was re-established on the island. From Kitty, the tour starts to return back towards the city, though on its way it makes 2 more stops, the first being by the banks of the Larnaca Salt Lake and the Hala Sultan Tekke. The Salt Lake is a network of 4 linked lakes that between them form the second largest salt lake in Cyprus, after the Limassol Salt Lake, covering a surface area of around 2.2 square kilometres. The lake is considered one of the most important wetlands of Cyprus and is home to at least 85 species of waterbirds, including a flock of up to 12,000 flamingos which overwinter on the lake. During winter months, the lake fills up both from water flow and rain, as well as the seawater that penetrates the porous rocks between the lake and the sea, making the water very salty. During the summer months, the water evaporates off, leaving behind salt that can be harvested, and in the past this used to be one of the island's major exports, though the last harvest took place in 1986. Alongside the lake is the Hala Sultan Tekke, one of the holiest shrines within Ottoman Sufi Islam. The complex houses the tomb of Haram, Muhammad's wet nurse. Haram also served alongside Muhammad during his campaigns as a nurse to his soldiers, and it's believed that she died as an elderly woman sometime between 647 and 649 after falling from her mule during a siege of Larnaca. She was later buried where she died, which is now the site of the mosque and her tomb. During the Ottoman period in Cyprus, a mosque complex was built in stages around the tomb. It's uncertain when work on the mosque started, but it was completed by November 1817. The site is a holy site for Turkish Cypriot Muslims, as well as being revered by all Muslims. The United Nations Development Programme in Cyprus describes the site as the 3rd holiest place for Muslims in the world after Mecca and Medina, though other sources list Jerusalem above the mosque in terms of importance. With the division of the island following the 1974 war and the mosque being located in the Greek Cypriot side of the island, pilgrimage visits to the site are now infrequent. The mosque complex is also home to one of the largest collections of semi-feral cats that live on the island. From the mosque by the lake, the bus tour continues, round past more of the Salt Lake, giving a better idea of the sheer size of the water, as well as some more opportunities to take in the sheer beauty of the mosque and the palms by the still waters. The final stop on the tour is the Kamares Aqueduct, also known as the Bekir Pasha Aqueduct, named after the Ottoman governor of Larnaca, Ebu Bekir Pasha, who financed the construction of it. Building work on the aqueduct started in 1747 and was complete by 1750.
And Roman times. The aqueduct is illuminated at night.
The aqueduct is widely considered to be the most prominent water supply built in Cyprus, taking water from a source about 10 kilometres away into Larnaca. At its height, the structure had had 75 arches, though only about 20 survive today, which is more surprising when you find out that it was only abandoned as a water supply service in 1939, when modern pipes were laid out in the city. Next time, I continue my exploration of this corner of Cyprus by visiting the Greek Cypriots' response to losing their most important resort town, taking in a network of sea caves at the most southeasterly point of Europe, and explore the Greek side of Europe's last divided capital, Nicosia.